This brief segment is going to appear in all of the videos because it's general information that can pertain to all of them. So if you're looking at the separate segments, you'll see this segment. Feel free to fast forward if you've already seen it in one of the other segments. It should be about 10 minutes or so. So basically, very quickly talking about this big band Afro-Latin setup, I would definitely put the skins in the front so that we can hear them and so that there's also better communication with the drummer and the bass player, depending on which spot you place your bass, which is why I put them both here. The timbales are strong instruments, so they should definitely go in the back. But definitely the congas and any auxiliary percussion, including the auxiliary percussion table, should go right here in the front with the bongo player seated and the conga player seated. Now, if you've got the little rubber feet, you can use those, but if it's a wooden stage, you don't need those because it'll project, especially if it's in the front. Pertaining to all the Brazilian and Cuban forms, they're based on two-bar patterns. If you take the melody and you cut it up into two-bar sections, you're going to have one side has more strong on-beats and the other side generally a few more upbeats. The measure with the stronger on-beats is called the two-side, and the other one is the three-side. So that leaves us with 3-2, or 2-3. Okay, now the Cubans call it a clave. The Brazilians don't like to use the word clave because that's a Cuban term. Okay, it's just their two-bar pattern. But here's the thing: the son clave, which is used in salsa, it's either in 3-2 or 2-3, depending on where the strong beats are in the melody. And then if you take the second note of the two side and delay it by half of a beat, it's taking you to Brazil because that's the Brazilian pattern. Okay, it's just like the son clave salsa pattern. But again, the second note of the two side is delayed by half of a beat. Now, if you go back to the salsa son clave pattern, if you take the third note of the three side and delay it by half a beat, then that gives you a rumba clave, okay? And they are different, and they pertain to different forms, so it's important to get that correct. Brazilian patterns are a bit more complex. There are more variations. They tend to be more rhythmic and including more offbeats. These are just general rehearsal tips, okay? Now, director's pre-prep. We do need to study the score. I mean, we study concert scores, don't we? So it's important, especially when you're talking about Afro-Latin styles. So try to find charts that have rhythm section parts written out. However, don't always trust those because there are charts out there that actually literally claim to be a certain genre, and then the patterns don't reflect that, okay? Now, if it's a chart that doesn't claim to have a genre, then that's different. Then, you know, there's more room for flexibility there using hybrid forms. So study it. Does the chart claim to have a certain style? In other words, by title or style, stylistic marking? If it doesn't, then there's flexibility to write or use hybrid patterns, of course. And some of my favorite charts are that way. Now, if it does claim to have a certain style or genre, okay, if the word mambo is in the title, or if it says son montuno, or if it says cha-cha-cha, then there is an obligation to have the correct patterns written, okay? So check accuracy. Look up the patterns at a trusted source. Do the guitar and the piano and the bass and the drum, do they all match the nation and the style that is claimed at the top of the page? Okay, does the drum set, the right hand, left hand patterns especially, do they match the claimed form? Does the bass line match the claimed form? Okay, I've seen charts that really claim to be a Cuban chart either in the title or in the genre, and then it's a Brazilian bass line. So, you know, you have to be careful and just make sure that all the rhythm parts line up. Does the piano comp, because that's mostly Brazilian. Not always, but mostly. And does it arpeggiate? That's mostly Cuban, okay? Now, again, cha-cha-cha can do both comp and arpeggiate. So accuracy is important for the kids' sake, okay? So that way, if they know, if it's a mambo chart and those patterns are there, okay, that really is a mambo. But if not, if the patterns don't match a mambo, you think, okay, that's still a cool chart, we still like it, but we know that that's not a mambo pattern, okay? So it's just important for educational sake. So here's the other thing. Tempo does not establish a style. It's the pattern that establishes a style. So fast does not mean it's a samba, and slow doesn't mean it's a bossa, because there are both tempos of each style. Rhythm. Try to have the rhythm individuals practice their grooves first. Then do a rhythm sectional and then put it together with the horns. Unless the kids in the rhythm section have experience with certain grooves, that's different. The rhythm section does need to sizzle, okay? But intensity doesn't mean loud. You can sizzle by the way you do the accents and the patterns that you use, and also changing colors. Also protect the intonation. Never let the rhythm section force the winds to blast. Kids do tend to get carried away with this kind of form, and sometimes the volume gets out of hand, okay? So it's important that they learned also to play soft passages. Next, don't add the clave pattern all the way through all the time. If you're playing a Cuban chart especially, you'll see people play claves, duck, 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 duck from bar one to the end. It becomes monotonous, okay? If the chart is written authentically, then the horn patterns will also indicate clave correct direction. If you're using congas, especially like with Cuban and Dominican forms, please ensure the correct pattern. That's important because in Cuban forms especially, and in Dominican forms, the conga player actually drives the bus, and their pattern is incredibly authentic and very important to be accurate. So again, the rhythm section needs to sizzle, but intensity doesn't mean loud. I said it again because it bears stressing. Okay, now the bass I left out the T. I'm sorry about that. Outlines mostly root and fifth. Okay, root and fifth of the chord. The accent points in the Brazilian forms are usually 1 and 3. So doons, ka-doon, da-doons, da-doon. And it's the and of 2 and the and of 4 that anticipates the next note. Not don, 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 don. It's don, da, 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 da. It's very important that we anticipate the next note. The accent points in Cuban are the and of 2 and 4. Unless it's a rumba, then it's mostly the and of 2. So bass drums and the bass need to be super tight. They tend to mirror each other in Latin forms. This is super important. Rehearse them together and then add the piano and the guitar. Make sure the drummer is playing the pattern that is written. If the composer specified a form and to boot actually took the trouble to write the groove, please make sure that the drummer is playing the correct pattern. Really pay attention to what cross-stick pattern they are playing, especially. Because it does matter, because if they're playing the wrong pattern, it could clash with the horns and actually change the genre of the chart. So tell the drummers to avoid filling until this 2-bar phrase endings, okay? So 3 sets of 2 of the actual fundamental pattern, and then a 2-bar or 1-bar phrase ending. So play solid time. And why is that? Because unlike swing, Afro-Latin drum set is a little less flexible, because each limb is literally a specific puzzle piece that pertains to the genre. So it's important. And swing has a little bit more flexibility because you've got that ride pattern and the hi-hat, and then you can do more with that left hand all over the drum set. All percussion, if you incorporate tutti fills at those phrase endings, those are called cierres, and they're very characteristic and very effective. And the drums reduce the volume to introduce the soloist, okay? Intensify to support the soloist, but definitely come down at the beginning of each soloist and simplify your pattern so that it's not too busy. And then on the last one, for piano specifics, in general, Brazilian forms, the piano will comp block chords, and so will the guitar, okay? In Cuban forms, the piano will mostly arpeggiate the chords, with the exception of cha-cha-cha, which can go back and forth between arpeggiating and block. And then the guitar should not play the piano montuno because that will clash, but can actually clamp clave pattern in Cuban forms. So that while the piano is playing the montuno, don, don, gong, 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 the guitar can go chunk, 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 following the chord structure. And it's just a real great sounding mix. Next, piano and the guitar should avoid comp clashing, okay? Alternate your roles. Don't get in each other's way. Auxiliary instruments, super important. Please research the correct pattern using that form. Don't just open up the percussion cabinet and hand stuff to everyone because the students won't know what to do and they could play clashes. Then it sounds chaotic, okay? Everything needs to be very carefully planned. So avoid adding the clave pattern all the time. We mentioned that prior. It becomes monotonous. You can have your, if you have an auxiliary player, you know, maybe play one pattern and then later on play shaker, straight eighth notes, and then go to guido, long stroke, up, up, if it's cha-cha-cha or something like that. Use these small auxiliaries sparingly. Vary it on the new phrases, like I just mentioned above, and please try to avoid mixing nations. Generally, Cuban forms, we use cowbell, conga, bongos, and guido, not to be confused with the guida. The guido is the gourd, round-looking one with the notches. Bongos, triangle, and agogo bells are generally used in Brazilian. So yeah, don't use a go-go bell in a Cuban chart. So there is no king, king, go-go, king, king, go. That's not Cuba, that's Brazil. So be very careful not to do that. And then congas and guira are generally used in the Dominican merengue. So guira is the one that is round, it's like a cylindrical shape with kind of the cheese grater, and it's metal and it's played with metal comb, okay? So that's not the guido. All right, so I hope that these general suggestions were helpful. And again, if you see this section again later on in one of the other videos, you can go ahead and fast forward and refer to it some other time and just go straight to the specifics on that particular form.
So what we're going to do is kind of look at each one of these different styles within each nationality and sort of do some examples on it and talk through it, and then do some listening as well. So the first the first style we're going to look at is the Bossa.
With Bossa Nova, now first of all, Bossa kind of came from Samba. So Samba is a bit more rhythmic, and we'll talk about that one after this. And Bossa basically kind of came about in the late 50s, early 60s, and really took the world by storm. And it kind of softens some of the rhythmic elements of Samba. And it primarily, now whereas some of the Cuban forms use more arpeggiating with the piano, there's more block comping with the piano in keeping with the fundamental pattern. Okay, now just so you know, Brazilians don't like to use the word clave when it comes to their 2-bar rhythmic pattern. Cuban, it uses the word claves. Now, Bossa doesn't use that word. It's just it's their fundamental pattern.
Yep.
But for example, da, 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 da. And what happens is, if you compare the Bossa pattern to the Brazilian, to the son clave,
yeah,
okay, which is salsa. Basically, you've got son clave is in 3-2 or 2-3. It's a 2-bar pattern. And Brazilian, the Bossa Nova, is extremely similar. The only difference is you take the second note of the 2 side and you delay it by half a beat. And all of a sudden, you've gone from Cuba to Brazil.
So Michelle, would you just real quick for people who are listening only, would you show us the 3-2 clave goes bop, 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 bop,
exactly,
bop, bop, bop. So what is it in Brazilian then?
In Brazilian, it's da, 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 da.
So just one different note.
Right, one bar has the 3 hits, the other bar has the 2 hits. So the one with the 3 hits is called the 3 side, the one with the 2 hits is called the 2 side. So basically what happens is you take the second note of the 2 side, you delay it by half a beat, and you've got Bossa Nova instead of salsa. Okay? Now, the same thing works in reverse, because some charts are 2-3. All right? Now, you may say to yourself, how do I know the difference if something is 3-2 or 2-3? You take the melodic line, you chop it up into chunks of 2 measures each, and wherever the stronger beats are, that's the 2 side. That's how you know if you're in 3-2 clave or 2-3. And Brazilian, that's how you know if you're in a 2-3 bossa or a 3-2 bossa. Okay?
Right.
Now, sharing the actual slide for the Brazilian, for bossa, here you can see these things that are highlighted in blue, and for those folks who are listening, I'm showing a small portion of a score where the bass drum part lines up with the bass part. And they line up perfectly, okay? And then the piano part is playing more block chords, and so is the guitar. Now, some of the elements that you're going to hear in Bossa Nova is triangle. A lot of times, if you hear shaker, you can hear bongos, and those rhythms also are in keeping with that fundamental pattern. This particular chart is called Carismática. And it's just came out in Excelsior. And I actually started the very first part of the chart with a guitar riff, which is in a bossa pattern. Listen throughout this chart, you'll hear these elements. The bass guitar and the bass drum lined up. You'll hear the piano and the guitar comping in rhythms that are in keeping with that 3-2 bossa pattern. You'll hear triangle, you'll hear shaker, and then you'll hear some traditional kind of melodic lines. And the way the chart is written, the chart itself should imply the fundamental pattern. So let's go ahead and listen to it.
So, Michelle, is there anything else about that chart you want to tell us?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, the theme is your inner charisma. That's why it's called Carismática, and it basically has a little message in there to the students. Always remember your inner charisma. And basically, I kind of wrote it in a kind of 60s throwback style. So it does sound kind of 60s, and it's a grade 3. And all of the rhythmic patterns are completely written down, so there's no guesswork. That's how I write all my charts.
Love it. All right. So next we're going to look at a samba, which is very similar to a bossa.
Basically, with the samba, that style is a little bit more complicated. And when I say that, it more on the drum set pattern. But in reality, horn parts also kind of reflect some of the rhythmic patterns. For example, like in the trombones, if I'll go da 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 da, and they're all playing a chord with that rhythm, it actually kind of helps to solidify that samba feel. And of course, there are different samba patterns, and a lot of it depends on folkloric region. So, one of the similarities between samba and bossa nova is that the bass part,
It's the same.
da-dun, 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 da-dun. Now, some bossa nova charts will just have chord half notes on the bass. Don, di, da, da. It depends on the chart itself.
Yep.
But there are bossa novas that also do share that don, da, ding, da, don, as the samba. Another similarity is block chord as opposed to more arpeggiated, because that's more Cuban forms. But the whole block chord comping on the piano. The instruments, again, similar with the triangles and the shakers. One thing that is important, especially in samba, is the use of the surdo drum. So you can incorporate some of those patterns in the drum set. The biggest difference is really in the cross stick pattern. So this is just one cross stick pattern that I like to use that's kind of like a little hybrid of some folkloric forms, but the drummer can also vary, but it's more rhythmic than the bossa nova. So in this next chart that I'm going to play, which is Postais do Rio, now Postais do Rio is a 2+, 3-. And on this one, you'll hear very early on that rhythmic pattern and use of guitar. And basically, it's got some folkloric kind of lines like that are optional, vocalized at the very beginning, or you can play it with the horns, and then it kind of kicks into the chart. And this is a grade 2+, 3-.
Okay, and we're going to listen to another samba as well, Samba Soul.
Yeah, now this one, actually a very personal chart. This one's a grade 4. Actually wrote this as an anniversary gift for our 25th anniversary. I wrote it as a gift to my husband, Chad. And I based it off the changes to Here's That Rainy Day, which are absolutely gorgeous, iconic changes. But I took the melody and I gave it a very uplifting, inspirational kind of melody. It's very sweeping. Now, the rhythmic pattern that I used on this one, it consists of some upbeats. So the samba pattern, like I mentioned before, is a little busier than the bossa pattern. And on this one, you've got da 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 da. And there are different variations that a drummer can play, like da 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 da. It's basically lots of upbeats, okay? And that just it just kind of brings the whole chart to life. And again, as you listen to this one, you'll hear that the bass and the bass drum and the bass guitar are lined up. You'll hear the hi-hat playing straight eighth notes as if it were a shaker. You'll hear the piano comping block chords rather than arpeggiating. Again, the arpeggiation is mostly for Cuban forms. And the guitar also comping in block chord. And This one, the musicians on this, I have to mention, are actually close friends and family. The flute player is actually our daughter. And the sax player is one of my students from my first year of teaching back in 1989. And the trumpet player is a good friend of mine who also does all of our mixing. So, kudos to all of the musicians here. The bass player is an ex-student of mine as well. So it's just nice to do some of these recording projects with close friends and family. But this is called Sal del Sol, and that means they are my son. And then in parentheses, it means green eyes, olos verdes. So that's the title of the tune. Okay, and here it is.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.